Welcome to Decades of Horror, the classic era.
Now, hear me out, and perhaps you'll understand the madness that drove me to harm him.
This is episode 119.
Perhaps.
Recorded February 20th, 2022. And this is a Mexican movie. It's not Herschel Gordon Lewis. Anyway.
Gruesome Magazine.
I am your host, Jeff Mohr. Chad's been spending a lot of time with Sammy, so, it was bound to come out. On this podcast, we cover the good, the bad, maybe even the ugly horror films since the beginning of time through 1969. In each episode, we'll discuss the monster, spirit, psychos, and villains that have haunted movie-going audiences since the dawn of film history. Decades of Horror, the classic era, is partnering with Play Now Media, which now includes video episodes of the classic era on 3 of its streaming channels: the Classic Sci-Fi Movie Channel, the Classic Horror Movie Channel, and the Wicked Horror TV Channel. The apps for each of those Play Now Media channels are available on Roku, Apple TV, Amazon Fire TV, Android TV, online websites across all OTT platforms, as well as mobile, tablet, and desktop.
And they're wicked awesome, all of them.
Yeah, and the
wicked awesome.
The movie we're doing
Quiet,
next,
Jeff.
which we'll tell people at the end of the podcast, maybe, is on the Classic Horror Movie Channel. So, okay. With me this week are my incredible co-hosts. Up first is Whitney Cayatso, an accomplished artist, makeup artist, and writer.
Not me,
How are you, Whitney?
Whitney.
Yeah,
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm excellent. Also with us, Chad Hunt, co-host of Decades of Horror, the All of Them, and film producer and director with Havoc Productions, and a comic book artist and writer. Chad, how are you?
I'm good. I'm working on my intro to be as long as Joseph Perry's and all the credits. So I got a ways to go, but I'm still working on it.
Okay.
The kind where it takes 2 breaths to say the whole intro.
Also with us, last but not least, is Daphne.
You're just gonna leave that laying there, right?
I'm just ignoring it.
Okay.
Okay. My brain's on forward, which means I don't think. I just moved to the next line. So also with us is Daphne, who is awesome, stupendous, and likable as hell. How you doing, Daphne?
I'm doing real good. Very,
2
very
out of
good.
3
Happy
ain't
to
bad.
see you.
Yeah. I got it. What's on top of that case behind you?
That's a snake's tongue plant.
Ooh.
Or a snake plant, also known as a mother-in-law tongue. But
None of that
that's not
sounds
nice.
good.
yeah.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. So on this podcast, we'll start by giving some basic details of the film that we're covering, followed by each of our first impressions of the movie, and then we'll move into a general discussion on whatever trips our triggers, hopefully related to the film. So, our topic.
In an attempt to be as cool as Chad, I'm going to start taping up little cool, not nearly as cool, but horror stuff over here in this little section.
Yeah.
It won't help you.
No, it won't, but I'll try.
She's got some pretty cool cross stitch.
She has pretty lights.
If the best you could come up with is mother-in-law tongue plants in the background,
Yeah.
we're all in big trouble.
Those are kind of scary things, I think. Snakes and
Your mother-in-laws are.
I don't know.
You could call them. Oh, never mind. Different podcast. All right. So our topic this episode is Dos Monjes, 1934, or The Two Monks. It's one of the earliest Mexican horror films, directed by Juan Bustillo Oro, written by Juan Bustillo Oro and Jose Manuel Cordero. Cast includes Victor Urchua,
Uh-huh.
And Carlos Villatoro, Magda Haller,
Mhm.
and Beltran de Heredia and Emma, probably here, not Heredia, Heredia,
Mhm.
and Emma Roldan.
Ooh, we're way up in Doc
That's
territory
all
right now.
five people. Production company is Proa Films. Release date was November 28th, 1934, Mexico City, and January 20th, 1935 in the USA. And the synopsis, we have no information on the budget or anything, and the also known as are all the same. In a monastery, a monk named Javier sees the face of another monk, Juan, and suddenly attempts to bludgeon him to death with a heavy crucifix. And all the other monks scream, "Sacrilege!" But both men then relate their own versions of the story of their romantic rivalry for Anita. And the two versions of the story differ significantly. As Juan begins to recover from the blow, Javier is subjected to horrific hallucinations. And that is, I believe, that's Javier we're seeing from the back in the monastery, and that's the crucifix he gets brained with. So it's not a small item. But this is kind of a start of an example of how this film really dives into expressionism. Just looking at the set and the lighting, etc. Okay, just a couple of posters, or maybe more. I like this one a lot, and the thing that I think is really interesting is it says Carlos Laemmle presents, which is it was distributed by Universal in the U.S.
Carl Laemmle.
Yep. So
That's
it's
pretty
kind
cool.
of a neat shot. I don't know where the violet comes from, and I don't know if that's something that would have been like that originally. It looks like an original poster, but maybe colored in some way. I don't know. We also found this one, which I don't know, could have been an ad in a newspaper, but it's a good representation as well. And this
I
one,
love that.
Yeah,
I like that one too.
how's the title pronounced again?
Dos
Whitney?
Mones?
That's Monjes?
Dos Mones?
That's Monjes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The J is like an H. It's Monjes.
Monjes, okay. Yeah. And that's some creepy looking monks.
Yeah.
I'll
Again,
say
this film has been released by Criterion, and that's a representation of that, what the cover art would look like. But right now, it's available as one film in Martin Scorsese's World Cinema Project number 3. It's interesting. They're from all over the world, and it's neat stuff that he thinks people should be aware of. Okay.
And more than that, I think it's he'd be aware of, but I think they actually do the restoration. They do a restoration of it, which I think is super cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say I thought he would have had a lot more Marvel movies in there included in that.
Yeah, a lot of people haven't seen those. You're right; they should be out there.
It's the IMCU, the International Marvel. Anyway, okay, so let's get. Oh, we do have one tagline, and I only got it by translating the Spanish blurbs on the poster. So whether it's correct or not, I'm not real sure, but I think it is. It makes sense.
Shall I?
Yes, please.
Oh, okay. A conflict between the spirit and the flesh. I'm not reading any of these in a Mexican accent. I'm sorry.
Well, that's
I keep forgetting.
So that was un conflicto entre el espíritu y el carne.
Exactly.
It was on this poster. Yes.
Yeah.
Or la carne. Yeah. Okay.
They do, the translators do weird stuff, I mean. All right.
I don't know. I understood it perfectly.
You get an
So
idea.
let's get on to first impression. So this one is Whitney's pick, and let's hear what she has to say. Why did you pick this? How did you find out about this, etc.?
I wanted to find something a little bit more like historic or something from Mexico. And I ended up looking at a YouTube list online, on YouTube, I saw a list of Mexican films in history, and then this one came up. And so I thought, okay, I'm interested in this one. And hearing the idea of the director and discussing that this would be something, that this is the second film in history to come out from Mexico, I thought it would be a good idea for us to watch. And the idea of, I'm bad at saying the Rashomon. How do you say that?
Rashomon.
The Rashomon idea behind the story, like knowing that you're going to hear two points of views on a conflict, and I was already taken to the idea of, okay, well, this is sort of up the alley of sort of the Gothic kind of atmosphere in a way. But once I watched it, I was really, like I said, into the idea of two points of views in the story, and it was just beautiful. The sets were like almost psychedelic in a way, like the way things were built, the windows, and then hearing one person and the other, knowing that they're supposed to be friends, and there's this one person that's in that shift, in that complex of the friendship, supposedly is the love interest between Javier and, I think it's Juan. I think that's his name. But yeah, there's Anita, and then knowing that there's that love triangle, but it's a weird twist towards the end of who's really telling the truth, whose side. I feel like the horror in this story is more of who has more of a morality and who's got more of a complex. I don't know. That's just how I'm seeing this story.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. I spent some time trying to figure out who was the most moral of the bunch of the two, I guess. At any rate, I'm not sure that's well, let's talk about that, see what else we've got to say. Daphne, how about you? Had you seen this before, and what are your impressions?
Nope, hadn't seen it before, and I enjoyed it. I also thought it was really beautiful. I loved the expressionism, and it was really neat seeing it from someplace other than like German expressionism. Since we've watched some of those, and I thought the actors were really, really good, especially the two, Juan and Javier. I thought that they were really. I thought Anita was great too, but since most of the interactions were between those two, I just thought that they did really, really well, and I loved some of the monk stuff. I really loved the prior. I thought he was great, super skinny, scary skeleton guy. Making Jesus hand gestures and stuff. And I liked that. I thought it was really neat. And I would also like to see the director Oro. Yeah. I guess another movie that he made was called Mystery of the Ghostly Face.
Mhm.
So I thought maybe checking that out too. I
Yep.
thought it was really
Yeah.
cool. And I liked the different color of clothes that were being worn. And there was one part that really stood out, a couple parts, but one part that I thought was neat was towards the end, there was a scene where the camera focused on a like a fire light in the alleyway while Juan was waiting to go back into the house to see Anita. And it was clearly a fake, like a stylized light. And I just thought it was so neat that the sets were just very clearly sets. And, you know, with that expressionist, just this is a weird kind of place that they're in. And so I thought it was really neat.
Yeah. I agree with you. Chad, what was your first impression?
I thought this was a very cool movie. First time ever seeing it. But I really like this kind of storytelling of getting the two different points of view from the characters and seeing how each different view, you know, pans out at the end. Has always been, and there's a few movies like that and some TV shows and stuff like that but it's not one that's overly used. You don't see that many stories like that. So I really enjoyed the two characters and seeing both of their sides. It's a beautifully shot movie. I mean, I was thinking this looks just like a Universal horror film, you know, with the expressionistic sets and everything's crooked and at odd angles and stuff like that. It really had that Gothic Universal feel to it, which I believe lent itself a lot to this particular story. It just made everything a little more creepy, a little more something's going on in the background that you may not know yet. Just gave an air of mystery and creepiness and scariness. So I enjoyed it a lot. The acting was really, really good. And I really enjoyed the characters a lot. So yeah, my first impression is I thought it was a great movie.
Yeah. I agree with everybody else. It's one of those movies that we sort of joke about it in that I don't know Spanish, so I've got to follow the subtitles. And in a movie like this, where there's so much put into it from the cinematography, it distracts when you're reading the subtitles or seeing everything, at least for me. So this is definitely a movie I watched more than once in order to catch all that stuff. But I loved it too. I love the opposing viewpoints, and it presents a situation, you know, it isn't that, well, it is, I guess. They knew different things, right? And so there's that part of the story, but it's also they're each telling their own subjective viewpoint, right? They're not really being objective about it. So I love the expressionism. I just love the sets, and as everybody else said, the odd angles, etc. So I don't know. I rather than spend more time talking about it, let's get into some of those details. So the director and the cinematographer. So the cinematographer is there on top. That is Augustine Maynez, and this was the first movie that he did that was a cinematographer on. Before that, he was a still photographer, which makes it even, I think, kind of more impressive.
I would really like to learn more about him. I kind of had only a short amount of time to look up information about him. I think they said he was kind of a leader in some avant-garde imageries in Mexico and art. And I just thought it was really neat, some of his shots. I would love to learn more about him.
And it's hard to find information on these guys. At least it was for me. That's in English. I found a couple spots that were in Spanish, and I didn't see where it was readily translatable. But like if you go to Wikipedia, it really doesn't tell you much of anything. I'm not sure that the cinematographer is even listed, and there's no bios in IMDb. And so most of what I learned, I got off of there's an extra on the Blu-ray with an interview with a guy named Charles Ramirez Berg, who was a cinema history professor at University of Texas. And he talks a lot about, in that 20 minutes, he talks a lot about the history of Mexican cinema, how it got started, and where Castillo Oro and Jimenez fit into it. And they were both foundational to the growth of Mexican cinema. So I don't know. I think you could see in the cinematography, I think you could see that they were either novice or had real basic equipment, because there were times where the camera's moving in and the focus is adjusted as it's moving in, and you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
The focus of the framing would move just a little bit as it was going in on a subject.
Like panning in.
Yeah. It's very ambitious, I think. Jimenez won Silver Ariel for Best Cinematography in 1956 and was nominated in 1950 and 1954. According to Berg, anyway, he was one of the top cinematographers in Mexican film history.
Yeah, I would love to see more movies that he did.
Well, it's so cool to see like the first one too, and then to go and see the others. He also said that Castillo Oro worked to make as a foundation to build the foundation of Mexican cinema, to make movies about Mexicans for Mexicans made by Mexicans. And I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Before that, they were getting like Hollywood versions of that stuff. So
I thought it was a beautiful. This was his first one, I thought he did an excellent job of creating that, like we were saying before, that universal look and the atmosphere and the creepiness of everything. And some of those pan in, pan out scenes, just, I don't know, I felt like it gave a dreamy quality to it, you know. So I was very amazed by the cinematography in it.
that's a good point. I'm not sure if it was intentional or not. You know, maybe it was intentional.
Yeah, but if it was, that was genius. If it was his first time, you know.
Again, according to Berg, and this is just a little side factoid, the first sound film in Mexican cinema is a movie called Santa, spelled like Santa Claus, only Santa, starring Lupita Tovar, who was in the Spanish version of Dracula.
Okay.
So I actually would kind of like to see that. And that was in 1932. And then, like Whitney said, this was the second horror film in Mexican cinema. And I forget that actually the first one was called something like Phantoms of the Convent. And the same guy that's the father or prior, or, you know.
Was he in that
monastery. One? He's in that one too. And those were his only 2 credits.
Yeah, I didn't see much about him. Yeah.
That just seemed odd. He's
interesting.
In a convent and a monastery. Yeah. any other roles like that for me.
Typecast, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the one whose name was Beltran de Heredia.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Phantom of the Convent, and I found that too is on. I forget where I saw it, but it's on YouTube. Yeah, this for people listening. This movie, the Criterion version is on YouTube for free if you look good enough. So anyway, yeah, these guys, it's cool to get in on this and see this. I'm so glad Whitney picked this.
Mhm.
Well, I thought it would be something different, and to like go that far back and find something a little bit more like close to, one side of culturally like that I might want to see, like, what is it that other people have seen, that maybe I could go back and tap into that root a little bit on my side and say, what can I see from this point of view that resonates today? And I hate to say it, but the thing that resonates from this a little bit today is the machismo attitude and point of view, which is like there's a little bit of chauvinism and wanting to have that character Anita between the two, and you see that in the perspectives of both sides of the story, and wanting and that desire of her. So I mean, I don't know if anyone else saw that either, but it's not so much about like too much of control, but it's like that desire to be that man in her life. And I'm like, man, that's some like dated machismo stuff is what I was thinking. But it was kind of neat though, just to see it that far back.
I kind of picked up on that too, even though it wasn't like you were saying, it wasn't like gross. It was just but it was definitely there. And I remember thinking, I wonder what Anita's point of view is. I mean, I feel like she kind of said, at least according to Juan's story, she said how she felt, but there wasn't a third perspective of Anita. And so that is, and I also thought it was really interesting. I mean, it's coming from two different stories, but I was interested. I thought it was interesting what the director kind of chose to make different, because a lot of it was exactly the same, but some parts were different, and a lot of it was her reaction, but it's her reaction from
Javier and
Juan's perspective. Yeah. But a lot of the other stuff was the same, but her reactions and how she acted. Yeah.
It's like in Javier's point of view, like you're seeing what he wants, what he desires, a little bit more of her. But in Juan's story, it's almost like they're trying to show you her personality a little bit more. Like he's saying it's not just what he wants, but it's what she wants.
Right, exactly. But it's still from his perspective.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly. But that's where you see the most change between the stories. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, in Javier's version, she is just always smiling and the loving fiance kind of. And in Juan's version, she has a lot of troubled glances and, waves of the hand to,
Well, and she does have some say in kind of what happens with the relationship in Javier's perspective, in Javier's story too. But yeah, you do wonder, like, well, what is her?
Right, because we didn't get her side, like they just a little bit here and there.
And I wonder if part of that too was just kind of showing the I just had it in my head, sorry, but kind of a little bit more of the stuff. It's like part of Javier's story was to tell that there was this other stuff going on. Part of Juan's story was to say that there was stuff going on that Javier didn't know about. And so that kind of, you had to kind of bring her in to kind of accentuate that like a little bit. But
yeah, so to quickly, I think, summarize the plot and interrupt me if you catch me stumbling here, but Javier is described as a consumptive musician. He's got a terminal illness, although we don't know that at first.
I think didn't they call consumption, was that leukemia? Or
I think it was anything that I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
Like cancer or TB or
yeah, maybe it was
tuberculosis. Yeah.
I think TB is what I usually think it's associated with, but it could, it's a good point. It could be.
I couldn't tell.
Could be anything.
I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Okay. And they don't ever identify it specifically.
No.
Just he has this kind of cough, and he's obviously weakened, you know, at times. So we kind of start off where he's composing this beautiful song on the piano, and through the window we see Anita, like across I don't know what you'd call it, an atrium or a small courtyard or something. You see her through the other window.
Yeah.
And he's intrigued by that, and she's watching him, but he also discovers that she has some, I don't know, some keepers that are not very nice people. In fact, what does he call them? The old codgers.
Codgers, yeah. Well, that's how it's translated anyway,
yeah. And some guy comes to court her, and he's actually, you know, kind of sexually mauling her, and she fights him off and scratches him, and he leaves disgusted. And then her, I don't know, whoever they are, her keepers or whoever, say, you know, if you're not going to bring, you know, do anything to better the house, then you're out. And Javier and his mother see this and go and invite her in, and then develop sort of a relationship. And he's sort of her mentor, teaches her how to read and how to write, and she's singing too. And so it kind of goes from there. And you also find out that there's this Javier's long lost friend Juan has come back to see him, and he comes in, and Javier's all excited to see him and introduces Anita to him, his fiance. And in Javier's version of the story, you don't see any reaction. You know, you can't really tell, but it turns out that Juan and Anita had a thing, and Anita promised to wait for him, apparently. But he was gone for 2 years, and she now feels committed to Javier because he's been so nice to her, and he needs her, and he's sick, and it's the right thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So
and if he finds out, it'll probably kill him. Is what they're
right. Because
about,
because literally, definitely because of his health. Like, how could he take that kind of stress? And
he has these.
That's emphasized.
Yeah. And in Javier's version of the story, the doctor tells him, "Oh, you're going to live to see your children, many years of your children's lives." And then in Juan's version of it, the doctor then walks out with Juan and is like, you know, whatever you do, don't tell his mom, but this guy's dying, and you know, won't be that long. And so, anyway, at some point, Juan's going to leave because he can't take it anymore. Anita tells him, I'm not going with you. I'm staying with Javier. He tries to force himself on her. They struggle a little bit. And Javier walks in and sees it. And he's been suspecting that there might be something going on. There's been signs. And I think he whacks him with a cane, doesn't he? Then Juan pulls out a gun and to shoot him, and accidentally shoots Anita. So Anita's dead, and then Juan runs away, and Javier goes off chasing after him, and then eventually they all end up in the monastery.
Yeah, and so they're the two monks, and then you find out why. He pretty much bludgeoned him with the crucifix in the first place. Yeah, like, oh my gosh, you see, that's how it starts. Like we see Javier just hit him, and I'm like, oh, what?
Yeah.
And then we went into this whole story of what Jeff
Yeah.
just explained.
You're right,
Like,
you're
it
right.
comes
Yeah.
full
It
circle
does.
of everything. Like, oh, so
Yeah.
this is why he
It starts
hit
with
him.
it starts with Javier kind of wailing in his,
Yeah,
I don't want to say his cell, but his room, the
yeah,
monastery, and the monks are talking about him as, oh, he's this crazy possessed by the devil
Yes.
guy, and we
Mhm.
need to try to help him. And oh, the only guy that can help him is our new brother Servando or something like that, and who's really Javier, or really Juan, I'm sorry. And when he goes in to talk to Javier, Javier recognizes him, and then he busts him over the head with that crucifix.
Yeah, that's his go-to weapon. Not just a crucifix, but something big
Something
to
big
Juan's
hit him
head.
over the head,
Yeah,
yeah.
I know.
And at the
I
end
thought
of the
that
film,
I thought that the effects of the injury on Juan's head were pretty cool both times.
It
Just
wasn't
this
bad, yeah.
massive gash, even though it was pretty simple.
Yeah. There wasn't enough of a dent
yeah,
because
Right.
that thing looked heavy. Yeah.
it was
Yeah, it did.
artistically done, I think, especially with
Yeah.
you see the cane flash down across his face, and then I don't know, there's like a quick cut, and he's kind of laying there, and there's blood dripping on his head, and he's looking up, and so they're not showing, it's not like now where you show the blood squirting and the brains dripping out or anything. There's
Right.
but anyway, so then the head of the monastery is trying to figure out why would he do this? And so he goes and talks to Javier. Javier tells him the story. And can you please grant me absolution? And he says, well, first I have to go talk to Juan. So he goes to Juan, and Juan tells the story. And then at some point they hear this organ playing, and it's playing the song he wrote for Anita, which is really eerie, especially coming out of this big pipe organ. And I know I went on way too long about this, but I think it's interesting to understand what some of those differences were. So Javier had no idea that Juan had a prior relationship with Anita until his mother kind of says, I don't think you guys should be quite so friendly with Juan.
Oh, that's right.
Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, his mother was involved in some ways, like especially when wasn't it Juan that said something to Javier about visiting a lawyer, and then even Javier's mother went with him to like, it's like it was her own way of trying to be protective over her own son. And
Juan's trying to get Javier away from Anita before he leaves. And so he tells him to go sit with this lawyer and go over these papers with him. And
so he can sway her.
And he has kind of an attack, and his mother says, you go home, I'll finish here with the lawyer. Because she went with him just because she was worried about him being sick. So,
right.
Anyway. And that's when he comes in upon them. Javier trying to convince her. All right. So these are the three leads. So Carlos Villatoro is Javier. And I guess from the sort of hollowed out eyes or makeup, that's the idea that he's sick.
Yeah.
Consumptive. And Anita is played by Magda Ayer, and Juan with the blood dripping across his face, and that's after you hit him with the cross, right? The crucifix.
There's no dent.
Yeah, I know. That was heavy duty. That thing was heavy duty.
I wouldn't want to get hit in the head with it.
No.
Well, not a particularly. It was a grotesque depiction of a crucifix in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like King Kong on it. It didn't look like.
Yeah, so the guy on the top is Javier, and the one on the bottom is Juan. Juan's the one that kills Anita.
Yeah.
They did great. I thought all three of them did great. Victor Urrutia, who played Juan, he does great in having this especially in that confrontation scene where he's earnest and trying to convince Anita to go with him, and then he's hurt and mad at Javier, and then when he pulls the gun out, he's got this nasty look on his face. I think I got that somewhere. I don't know. Well, we'll get to it.
What with Oh, you go ahead.
With the three of them in that scene. So this is an example of kind of the set. The monastery, Chad, you brought this up. The monastery could have just as well been a series of chambers in Dracula's castle or Frankenstein's castle or something.
Yeah, you're right. Definitely.
And the whole movie is kind of filled with these steps and I don't know how you describe it, like different layers of different heights of the set.
Yeah, especially because that's like altars, and when you think of something that revolves around Catholicism, you think of there's stuff that's more adorned and like decorated.
So stark. Yeah.
But it's just it's not that way. So there's so much emptiness, and there's space, and it seems like that definitely sets the tone and the atmosphere. Just seeing how
there's
the light and dark is.
Yeah, these pools of light that are kind of defined.
Well, and the different layers, the different levels too in Javier's room.
Yeah,
I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah. Well, I'm just going to go on down these because I pulled some of these for specific reasons. So these were another thing that this cinematographer and the director do are these, I don't know what to call them other than cockeyed camera angles. So
they're Batman 66 camera angles.
Yes.
That's where the
you're right.
the father is talking to Juan to get his story. But yeah, it's just out of whack. And then this is when, after Javier's playing the organ and he's starting to kind of hallucinate and he's near death. We don't necessarily know that at the time, but and this is also another thing that they did a lot is they would put the subject clear down in an extreme part of the shot. So he's like this little thing clear down in the bottom, as opposed to being like a center focus. They do that a fair amount. There's where he picks up Anita, where Javier picks up Anita after she's shot and lays her on that, I don't know what that is, a chase lounge or something.
Yes.
He bends clear down to where you almost can't see her. She's almost out of the shot. But I think that's symbolic of.
Well, this shot here, I think, does such a good, like where his placement is that you were talking about, is such a good job getting that feeling across of how he is like, has all this stuff is going on around him and he is like losing touch with reality. Like he's shrinking away from reality. It's really, it does that, gives you that feeling without you even really knowing or being able to identify it.
Right. And to know that he had all the stress, not only just because of his health, but also because he no longer has the woman that he loves. And he just told that perspective, and now he's off, he's playing this music and he's just, I don't want to say lost it, but there's so much emotional damage.
Yeah. Well, he's definitely has some sort of breakdown or something. And they did a really good job, expressing that without it making it seem kind of silly or over the top. I mean, he has some sort of breakdown or something.
Yeah.
I saw it as totally silly because it looks like he's asking that kid, there's a burnt orange crayon missing out of this giant pack behind me. But he's not getting any answers. I mean,
he's not even listening to him. He's not even listening to him. Gosh.
The kid's just looking up going,
It's the Crayola school of cinematography.
Yes.
Jesus Christ, answer me. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it looks like he's
No,
just
exactly.
had,
Yeah.
yeah. It looks like he's just had enough of this kid, you know.
Yeah.
I'd go
It's like
crazy too.
You tore off all the wrappers to tell us what the names
Yeah.
are. I don't
You
know
lost
what
the
Yeah.
sharpener.
I know.
The other guy that was here to help me hold these up so I could do my artwork is gone. He took a break and never came back. That's what I got from that.
How many
Yeah.
Hail Marys? No, I'm kidding. No, it's funny. I like that, Chad.
I just have a different outlook on things. I guess.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
great.
Well, another tilted shot that shows another monk who's
Yeah.
walking along, and there's these big blocks with
Mhm.
Yeah, the
like
pillars
candles
are so
on the top
Mhm.
of them. It's just like they couldn't be providing much light.
I love the monks. Their
Yes.
faces were so distinct and interesting. And I loved when they were all kind of huddled in the doorway watching the head monk, the prior or whatever, talking to
Yeah.
Javier.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
they wanted to
A
know
bunch
what was
of-
going on too.
A bunch of
And then-
snoops, you know.
Exactly.
What's he saying?
And then you see that towards the end, like of them huddling and wanting to see more, and then seeing that stress Javier out more to the point of these hallucinations.
Mhm.
And like everything like becomes like animated
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
mask like. Seeing their faces, like when you mentioned their faces being so distinct, you see those faces so animated and like transforming into
Oh, you're
That
yeah,
stuff.
absolutely right. I didn't think about that, but their real life faces are definitely you could see them in those masks for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, well, I tried to find a picture of when those masks were like, it was almost
Mhm.
like they were flipping through a Rolodex
Mhm.
coming at them.
right. It
But I
was
didn't,
so bizarre.
Mhm.
But yeah,
and they're
yes.
all carrying one of the
Yeah.
version of the crucifix.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sacrilege. And those are some, yeah.
Bring
Makes
forth the Kong cross.
So yeah, we talked about. I mentioned that shot where it like starts out in the back when Javier starts telling this story. So
Mhm.
he's at the piano, and you can't see it in this shot, but when it starts out, it's literally like pointing down at these steps that are in his
Mhm.
like where he's sitting is raised up like 3 or 4 steps, and the camera shot's pointing at those steps, and then it starts to raise up. He's clear at the very top of the shot to start with, and then it starts to come down, and we see Maria or Anita, I'm sorry, in the center of the shot, and then the camera just keeps moving, goes right through the window, and we end up with this shot of Anita.
Right.
And that's also it's kind of hard to tell here, but that those panes are not square.
No.
They're just off a little
Right.
bit, and then you add all the shadows and everything, and it just is a almost like, kind of a chaotic set.
Yeah.
You see on the other side, you see the shadows of the panes on the drapes that just look like, I don't know.
Everything's perfect on
Yeah.
her side. Everything's
Yeah.
beautiful and perfect on her side, and everything on his side is
Oh,
chaotic and off. And I think that really, I felt like that was a symbol of you're seeing this beautiful, perfect creature of Anita, and then you're seeing him in his troubled, strange world and his atmosphere. That's how I took it.
This is a trick used in comics, and comic books probably got this from film,
Yeah.
from early film and the expressionistic films. But if you look back on a lot of comic, even we started talking about the Batman TV show. the Batman TV show always showed these weird angles when the villains were on, and odd camera angles and just weird stuff like that because it was the villain. The villains are supposed to be twisted,
Yeah.
or it's showing some kind of, they're in chaos and that kind of thing. But then a lot of the shots with the superhero are straight ahead. Everything's square, everything's perfect, But as soon as the villains come in, there's dark shadows falling across and that kind of thing. So comics, I think, owes a lot to this type of filmmaking too, because it's used very heavily. It was in the beginning, and even so now. But I just thought that's a very interesting way of telling a story by having the set design, tell you what these characters are feeling and what they're going through.
Well, and that one just is magnifies it too for me.
Yes.
He's in, and this is when he's telling the story, and he's in strife in some way, and these shadows. It's just everything is odd.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful shot too.
It is. Oh, it's absolutely beautiful.
It really does. Just everything's not right with him.
Absolutely.
And I just love that little trope of storytelling. I do.
That storytelling that you were talking about is something that has fascinated me for a long time, and I've really appreciated. And I hadn't thought about it in comics because I'm not as familiar with comics, but I've always been impressed with like an anime, how, and manga probably too, of how, because it's a drawing, it's art, you can create a person's insides by how they look on the outside. So you can, and then you can really tell a lot about, you can express a lot about a character by these wacky things about them. And I love that that's a way of telling you about a character. And so when you were describing that in comics, I was like, yeah, I love that. I love that that is part of how you tell what a character is like, or what they're thinking, or something you can't really express any other way, that you can only express in that way. Yeah.
And a lot of people won't pick that up just by seeing it, but subliminally.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. We pick up on it, I think, when we watch it and see
without even knowing. Yeah. Which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the stuff that you were talking about, I think, Whitney, when you were talking about the beautiful, also part of the beautiful on Anita's side, then when you see, like when he turns off the light on his side and he kind of watches some of the shadows behind the curtains, they're a little bit more grotesque. And and then the man who's one of her caretakers, I just love how his body was kind of, he definitely had that kind of Igor type, and skinny part to kind of represent his carjeriness, as Javier put it, or his tightness, But yeah, behind that curtain of everything being perfect was this other stuff going on. She was basically being sold to this guy, and I
forget what he says too, but when he kicks her out as he's like going back inside, he shoots her a real nasty comment too about, oh, you're a consumptive musician.
We'll see what he asks for taking you in. It's just like gross.
Right.
Well, he was a gross old man.
Yeah.
And I feel like culturally looking at that, like, I'm not saying all guys in Mexican culture, but like I said, it kind of goes back to that machismo, chauvinistic attitude, because that's exactly where it's at when you hear that guy saying, well, we'll see what he wants when you take him in, because that is such a problem like then, and it's still a problem now. I mean, of course things are getting better with time, but I thought it was interesting seeing how treating women in this film and how it's still prevalent today. I mean, especially it's a hard-hitting thing, especially in Mexican culture too, for women, how they're looked at as something rather than a person, and how that guy treated her, and how you see behind the scenes and how he spoke to her. But that's,
and she really had no other alternative.
Yeah,
She had
yeah.
no choice.
Right.
I mean, she exhibited quite a bit of choice by fighting back with that man that they brought in.
Yeah.
But that got her kicked out. Got her kicked out of the house.
Yeah.
She's probably the most moral character in the movie, and she gets killed.
Yes.
That's what you get.
I mean, she tries to do the right thing all the way along, and
yeah,
man,
just
well, and I've been watching a lot of like historical dramas, and like I don't know, Mary Queen of Scots and Anne of a Thousand Days and stuff like that. And what's really been hitting me is how, and I haven't done a study of this, so there's probably a lot more of that going on than I know about, but the woman's life depends on who she can, who she can pair with, I guess, or who she can mate with.
Right.
Because are they rich? Will she be comfortable, or will she have a really hard life of working hard? It's not to say whether the spouse will be a good person or not, but their quality of their situation is totally based on who they can connect with. They have very little, and that's why in most of these movies, the women, the women's courts and things like that, whether it was like that or not, they're all like conspiring in the background, trying to manipulate things and work things out on who's going to be with who and I'm going to turn him against her so I can, and it's not all that hard to believe, and it's not their fault. It's the
situation, right?
Situation that they're in,
the choices it's having to make.
Right.
And so she is, you're saying it's up. She doesn't really have much of a choice, but at the same time, she does. She could leave and go with Juan. She doesn't really have any choice except to go in with Javier and his mother. It's like, where else is she going to go? But she's turned that into a good thing. And at the end, she could leave with Juan, and he seems to be fairly wealthy, but she does the moral thing, or I think she even says it's the right thing to do.
Right.
Stay here. I owe it to Javier.
I do think it's interesting, though, the fact that, you don't have her story, because, I mean, she didn't, like you said, she didn't have to choose that.
You're
and
right.
It would have been perfectly fine if she didn't. I mean, I don't even necessarily know that it is the moral or the right thing to do. And some of the stuff but I totally understand that she made that choice and she didn't want to hurt this person who she cared about. I mean, she cared about him immensely. She loved him. But some of the stuff that Whitney was talking about with machismo, I feel like it makes me think about how even separate from machismo, you can see, like, in American culture or other Western culture, that the opportunities that women have and the choices that they have, and kind of how they have to make decisions, maybe not based on their own self-interest, but on what society tells them that they need to.
That's exactly it.
To be a person, to be a good person, or to be a woman or a good woman or something like that. So, I mean, that's still around us all the time, I mean, that's
and
just how it is.
and I want to correct what I said. I'm sort of going by what she said in terms of
absolutely. Yeah.
Her
and I didn't want to sound
thought was the right thing to do. But who's to say? It seemed to me like she was perfectly within her right to have left with Juan.
Right.
Right. And I didn't think you were saying that. I was just, but I because I feel like she did make that choice. She did She did want to stay with him.
Yeah.
But it just almost on a side note that it's like, they were never really any of her choices. I mean, she did have, I didn't want to take that agency away from her, but there, some of the stuff when we were talking about in society that kind of dictates what your choices are and kind of maybe plays a role in what choices you make,
Right.
are there,
And seeing that this film is taking, place in a religious atmosphere, like what comes with Catholicism, some people like feel like the sin or the horror is the sin, and with that sin is the guilt. And then I feel like that's a huge reflection, especially in Mexican horror, and this horror especially. And then seeing again, coming into society from Javier's perspective, what is he confessing? Is this really confession, or does he feel like he's really telling something just to get it off of his chest?
Yeah.
And then the same from Juan, is this really his sin? Like, this is his confession. And I feel like that kind of thing centers around the spiritual horror of things.
That made me realize that what you just said made me realize that something that I noticed that I thought was interesting about when Juan was telling his story, because he said, I already have gotten absolution for this, but I'm going to tell you anyway. So it was different than Javier asking for absolution and saying, oh, you're leaving without giving me this. Juan was like, oh, I already got it, but I'll tell you the story, because I feel guilty, which, he did definitely felt guilty and bad about it. But I just thought it was interesting, their way of looking at that role of with sin and with the church and making this confession.
Well, and I think, and maybe I'm getting it wrong, but it's like, to me, Anita is the only one that's, whether it's misguided or not, is trying to do the right thing. Juan and Javier are trying to force it from the emotional side and overreaction and physical and mad, and that maybe that's what you're talking about, the machismo.
I mean,
go ahead.
No, I mean, that's definitely something. What I'm saying is, I mean, I'm not trying to like dissect everything completely, but no, I mean, especially when it comes to the guilt, but when especially in that culture, it feels really forced, and you see it in some upbringing, and I've seen it in some of my own personal upbringing. It's like, yeah, so I'm here, I have to tell you, sort of thing. Like it's definitely how they have to force it, how they have to tell it, or how they feel their truth. They feel like they're telling their truth, but you're questioning, is it really genuine?
Oh, right. It's definitely subjective. And this is the idea that, so in the top picture, this is when Javier's telling his version of the story. And we see Juan on the left holding the gun. And the thing I want to point out is that Javier is wearing white or light clothing and Juan is in dark. So Javier is like the white hat guy and he's telling his version of the story. And in the bottom picture is when Javier's telling, or Juan, did I get him mixed up that time? When Javier's telling the story, he's like the white hat guy. And when Juan is telling the story in the bottom picture here, he's wearing white. So they switched that. And I don't know that I noticed that the first time through. I think I did when Javier walks into the room and sees Juan's cloak and hat and cane on the table. The first time I watched it, I remember thinking, wait a minute, wasn't that just black? Weren't they dark? And I was picking up on the first time they showed it. So, but I think it's an interesting technique to depict how we tell the story that we were a part of.
Looking at these pictures here, I'm reminded that they had really good chemistry, Anita and Juan.
Yeah.
Like when they were together, I really felt like the sparks fly, and now that I'm thinking about it, when Anita was with Javier, it was always very sweet, and you could tell that she loved him too. But as for the actors, I felt like
Yes.
Juan and Anita really, you could feel it between them.
It's like Chad said, again, it feels like a universal horror movie in a way in the setting. But it's not a monster movie. It's more about the horror within these two guys and how its effect as Anita suffers the consequences of that.
Yeah.
It was a good movie.
Yeah, it was.
All righty. Anything else you want to talk about?
I would recommend this movie to people.
Yeah.
It really is a good film. Well made. If you like the old Gothic Universal stuff, it's like Jeff said, it's not a monster movie, but it has that same atmosphere as an old Universal film.
There's a neat thing too where there's several scenes that are in this kind of courtyard with a tree, and you can tell the seasons by the trees completely blossomed and everything, or it's really barren branches and stuff, and that's usually when he's sick, which coincides with that. Am I going to make it to spring? That's another trope. So, according to Charles Ramirez Berg, the first sound film in Mexico was in 1932, and it blossomed to 23 films released in Mexico in 1933, and went on from there. And Bustillo Oro was part of that, and working in a group. And there's a picture of him. I didn't pull up, but there's a picture of him with a group of men that were working on doing that, working in Mexico to build up the film industry and make it independent. All righty. You know what? I think that's it. Great pick, Whitney. I love it.
Oh,
when you
thanks.
pick this stuff.
Daphne said chicken butt.
Yeah.
Well, you asked for it, Jeff.
I said, you know what? I said it. I said it.
That's funny.
You can tell you have a toddler nephew that you spend time with. Anyway, I did not pull the feedback. I ran out of time. I didn't do it. So we'll have to do that next time. But yeah, great pick, Whitney. Check this out on YouTube or wherever else you can find it. It looks pretty darn good, considering where it came from, and that they had to what did they have to? They had to piece a negative and a first positive together to get all the parts. I thought that's what it said at the beginning.
Did they have that description? I watched it on the streaming on Criterion, so I didn't watch it on the other. But I found it interesting that they explained how the restoration process was. I was just wondering if that's just part of the film now, that it's included as an introduction.
That was on the front on YouTube too. Yeah. So
that was really neat.
So, all righty. Well, that's it for this episode. But every 2 weeks, we'll be focusing on a specific film released between 1920 and 1969. Next up is one chosen by Chad. Do you remember what you picked, Chad?
No, I don't. It's got to be on the workflow, or I refuse to bring it up.
It's on the email I sent.
Is it? Well, I didn't read that either.
Donovan's Brain.
That's right. Donovan's Brain, everybody.
That's right.
Yeah, like,
From 1953. And we're back into the science fiction realm.
I haven't
All right.
seen this movie since I was like 5 years old.
Oh wow,
Yes, but
cool.
By Siadmak.
Kurt Siodmak? I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe.
Um, So who's a definitely a strong-handed, strong science fiction writer. All right, well, we should wind this up instead of bumbling around here. So come back for Donovan's Brain.
Siodmak.
And there's plenty of ways to stay in touch. Please send feedback to feedback@gruesomemagazine.com, or better yet, leave comments on Gruesome Magazine's YouTube channel. You can also do Gruesome Magazine's H&R and DOH podcast Facebook group, or even on the website, gruesomemagazine.com. Lots of ways to leave comments. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. There's another thing there. What
I don't know
was
what you're
that?
talking about.
Tail?
yes.
That looked strangely like something from Abyss,
Aw.
like the
Yes,
monopodal thing.
he was
coming
doing
out,
his
yeah.
Cthulhu imitation. there.
I'll bet. All
All
right. Catch us again here in 2 weeks for another great horror movie of the classic era, as only decades of horror can do it. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Chicken butt.